Okay, folks, I believe it's for the most part 6 o'clock, and so we will convene this meeting. This is the regular meeting of the Common Council of the City of Platteville. It is Tuesday, March 26, 2024, and as I noted, it is 6 o'clock. We're in the council chambers of City Hall. Nicola, we'll start with roll call.
Bob Casper,
Here.
Ken Killian. Ken Killian,
Here.
Bob Doss,
Here.
Lynn Parrott.
Here.
Kathy Kopp. Here. Jason Otts.
Yep.
Bob Gates.
Here.
Okay, the first item on our agenda tonight is a public hearing. This is resolution 24-01, conditional use permit and sidewalk cafe permit. These are for 130 Market Street, and we'll start with staff presentation.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so the request is for the property at 130 Market Street. So that's the 50/50 Speakeasy Tavern. So as you mentioned, there are actually two separate requests, but they're related. The first one is a conditional use permit for outdoor eating, drinking area. So they'd like to expand the business operations onto the front porch to the south side of the building facing City Park. And then the second part would be the sidewalk cafe, which is partially on private property and partially on the public sidewalk. So that part would just be essentially putting two small tables and 4 chairs to go with them. Along the front of the property, there's a landscaping area, small retaining wall. So it would go right next to that wall adjacent to the public sidewalk. So both areas would be basically have the same hours of operation, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Saturday. So the outdoor drinking area on the porch requires a conditional use permit, and then the other one is a separate approval, as I mentioned. So the Planning Commission did consider both of these requests at their March meeting and did recommend approval of both requests. Staff would agree and recommend approval with conditions. The conditional use permit would be subject to the conditions in section 2206J, which outlines how the outdoor drinking areas have to operate and the details of the conditions on that. And then the sidewalk cafe permit would be subject to section 4.07, which also outlines the additional details on sidewalk cafe permits. Any questions?
Questions of staff. Okay, Joe, I do have a question. If the conditional use permit is for the porch only.
Correct. They had previously received approval for the north side of the building to the back.
Right.
So that was a separate one. So at this point, it'd just be the porch.
So it's the porch only.
Correct.
And then the sidewalk cafe is for the sidewalk only.
Right.
So how do you get from one to the other?
Walk. I don't
But
know.
I
So
mean,
that would have to be.
It would not be
outlined.
permitted.
It would have to be included in the liquor license description as far as the grounds that are covered on that. But the idea is that people would not be sitting elsewhere on the property.
So the
They would-
seating would be exclusively on the porch and
And the-
exclusively at 2 tables that fit within the boundary outlined.
That is
And
what they're requesting.
exclusively on
Correct.
4 chairs.
Right.
And how is that monitored or whatever?
So I mean, we don't have an active monitoring program. I mean, the other ones that we've had downtown, I just kind of checked on them when they first set up the arrangement. And then basically just relied on if there's any issues that the public or somebody else would bring it to our attention. I mean, we can certainly do an active inspection if that's what the council desires. I mean, I'm always looking for a reason to get out of the office on a nice summer day. So if that's what you want, I'm all.
You know, in the big
In
scheme
favor.
of things, perhaps is a few people sitting on some chairs having a beer outside of a residence, you know, in the downtown area, that big of an issue that we even have to worry about it. I really commend these people for trying to develop a downtown environment that's welcoming, like some of the other cities we have around here, particularly to the south. You know, and I think this is one of these examples where we've set up a bunch of rules that prohibit the changing of the downtown environment into something that's more family friendly, less of a beer party per se, but more of a sit down type environment where people are enjoying themselves. And perhaps the removal of some of these conditions in section 2206, perhaps some of the removal of some of these conditions in section 407, so we can continue to grow our downtown into an environment where people and adults can go down and enjoy themselves. You know, and I really commend these people for putting their own money forward, battling every condition and section. It seems been set up to stop it. You know, and I think we just need to continue to grow. I hear a million people say they want Platteville to be more like Galena, but it's very hard when you have section 22, you have section 4, and these other sections that prohibit anybody from even attempting to do this. So I just want to say I commend the Haases, I believe it is, for trying to do this and spending their own money to do it. And honestly, I don't think the city should have to worry about it too much. If it grows to be a problem, I'm certain we can address it. I guess, thank you.
Yeah, well, I can say that when we were adopting those rules and the ones that we have reviewed before, really the only concern that was really raised was that they're not blocking the sidewalk to let other people get by. And then the only other concern that came up was if they're serving, you know, food out there, for instance, downtown, if they have napkins or something that blows around, they wanted to make sure that it was, you know, maintained so they're not littering downtown, but.
I wanted to get out towards
Um,
Walmart and get stuck in the field. That's their bag.
But other than that, those have been the only kind of concerns that have been raised as we've gone through this process.
I'm happy to see we're moving forward and getting stuff like this in our city.
Any other questions?
I have a question from last time, and excuse me, the question is, what is the involvement of the state in this? I mean, a while back, they were saying certain things that couldn't be done, and are they satisfied with what's going to be done now in the future here?
So the state is not directly involved in this request. They got involved previously when as part of the liquor license, because on this property, there were two different businesses that one had a liquor license, the other one did not with the salon. The salon is relocating. So going forward, it'll just be the speakeasy on this entire property. So those, my understanding is the concerns that they had will be alleviated in that regard. But the
That was fine.
liquor license boundaries itself, as I mentioned, that part of it still has to be approved, but the state was, my understanding, the state looked at it and said, well, you can't authorize that yet because they haven't been given authorization to have the outdoor areas approved yet. So this was kind of the first step, and then the modification of the liquor license is the second step.
So that was really what my question was, because if you put a conditional use here and a sidewalk here, you know, I mean, I know it seemed facetious to say, how do you
Yeah.
get from one to the other?
Right.
But in fact, that's the issue that we've had, is how do you get from one to the other? So to me, you know, the question was, why didn't the conditional use permit include the sidewalk on their property? I mean,
Well,
wouldn't that
under
have
this-
made,
And I think that probably might have to be part of the liquor license part, but under our part, the
It doesn't
conditional
have-
use doesn't govern the public sidewalk, the sidewalk.
no,
that
I mean,
they-
their
it's the public
private sidewalk that gets in.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, that wasn't, maybe they weren't thinking of it when they filled out the application. They had just talked about the porch, but
I mean, I would hate for us now to get into a situation where, yeah, we approved this condition and we approved this sidewalk, but now when we go to a liquor license, it's not possible because we didn't extend the conditional use to their private sidewalk. They have a private sidewalk
correct.
that leads
Right.
to the public sidewalk, which is kind of what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, I'm assuming that was just, they weren't thinking about that little detail.
Add it to the motion.
Actually, we aren't, because we have a public hearing. So we also have to go through a series of, opportunities. So the applicant is not here. So there is no applicant statement. So the next item then on a public hearing are public statements in favor. And Michael Walsh has asked to speak in favor of this conditional use permit and sidewalk cafe. So Michael.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Michael Walsh, 435 West Madison Street here in Platteville. I'm also the executive director for the Platteville Main Street program. And the Platteville Main Street program and myself are in favor of the conditional use permits laid forth to the council for 130 Market Street. Way we look at it, we have sidewalk cafes on Main Street now. The opposition that I've heard to it, or the concerns I had heard, was more around the area of the sidewalk that would be accessible to pedestrians once the sidewalk cafe was put in. In looking at it and looking at the areas downtown, there's just as much room there as there is on Main Street, and Market Street has a lot less pedestrian traffic. So it really wouldn't be as much of an issue, even for the ones that are already approved on Main. Lisa and Jeff have done a wonderful job with the business that they have. They're restructuring it right now to be able to turn it over completely into a 50-50. And because of that, I think going forward with the plans that they have is the best thing, not only for Market Street, for the Main Street District, but Platteville as a whole. So we'd like to see more of these type of opportunities. And for that reason and others, the Main Street program endorses the approval of both conditional use permits, in hopes that the council will too. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the only person that had registered to speak in favor. I've had no one register with a public statement against. I've had nobody register to speak in general about these permits. Therefore, we would be to the point of a public hearing where we're at council discussion. So are there any further questions, comments, or concerns? I think, hopefully we don't have to come back again for extending a conditional use permit for a public sidewalk. And I don't know the liquor laws well enough, but that was my concern, that we really don't have a contiguous area if it's required. And Joe, you would have to.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the conditional use permit, you could include it in the motion, and includes connecting the two, if
Yeah.
that would alleviate.
I think that
their
would,
concern.
I think that would be good, because then when it comes to the license committee, then that condition has been met. So yeah, there's a conditional use all the way to the public sidewalk, and then you can have a sidewalk permit. I mean, it seems pretty.
And then it's the applicant's intent to submit the application for extending the premise on their current license, which would include all the way down to the sidewalk and including that section of the sidewalk.
So it's probably a good thing then to put that in the motion. Okay, any other discussion? Uh-oh. That's not for this item. So I would take a motion then to close the public hearing.
I so move.
Second. Okay, Nicola, we will vote on closing the public hearing.
Is the second Kathy? Yeah, thank you. Esper,
Yes.
Gillian,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes?
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Otts,
Yes.
Gates.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we're now ready for common council action, and I would remind you, we have two different requests, so it will take two motions. One is for a conditional use permit for the outdoor eating area. Currently says the front porch. I believe we talked about perhaps extending that condition through their private sidewalk. And then the second would be for a sidewalk cafe permit. So I'll take a motion on first the conditional use permit. Okay,
Second.
we have a
I-
motion. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, I move to approve the conditional use permit to allow an outdoor drinking area on the front porch and the private sidewalk at 130 Market Street as proposed in the application materials and subject to the conditions of section 2206J of the municipal code.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Nicola will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Doss.
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Cop.
Yes.
Arts. Gates.
Yes.
Okay, the second motion would be for a sidewalk cafe permit. This would be on allowing outdoor eating and a drinking area on public sidewalk in front of 130 Market Street, subject to conditions of section 4.07. Do I hear a motion?
A motion to approve a sidewalk cafe permit on the public sidewalk in front of 130 Market Street as proposed in the application materials and subject to the conditions of section 4.07 of the municipal code.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Lynn and a second by Jason to approve the sidewalk cafe permit. We'll vote. Nicola?
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss.
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Cop.
Yes.
Arts.
Yes.
Gates.
Yes.
All right, that takes care of our public hearing for the evening. The next item on our agenda is consideration of the consent agenda. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature. Please indicate if you prefer a separate discussion and action. We have the council minutes from the regular meeting on March the 12th. Payment of bills. I have no appointments for boards or commissions tonight. Licenses, we have 1 and 2 year operator licenses to sell and serve alcohol is in your packet. Request to extend licensed premises of Nick's Bar at 74 North Second Street to include the parking lots on Third Street and North Third Street from Main Street to Mineral Street from 11 Saturday, May 4th to 2:30 a.m. Sunday, May 5th. This is for Derby Days. A temporary Class B to serve fermented malt beverages and wine for Grant County Family Literacy Services at 225 West Main. That's the Platteville Library from 6 to 10 on Saturday, April 6th for Loud at the Library. Permits, a run and walk permit for Southwest Health, the Nurses 5K Run and Walk on Saturday, May 4th, starting at 9. Kiwanis Badger Crawl 5K Walk and Run on Saturday, May 11th, starting at 9. The Grant County the Grant County Humane Society Run, Walk, and Wag on Saturday, June 15th, starting at 9. Street closings, we have North Third Street from Main Street to Mineral Street for Derby Days on Saturday, May 4th from 11 to 2:30 a.m. Main Street from Chestnut Street to Water Street for the 4th annual Platteville Cruise In on Main by the Southwest Wisconsin Auto Club on Saturday, July 20th from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. I would take a motion, or if anybody needs,
I have one
Separate.
item I want to discuss under council minutes. And
so you
we-
want that pulled from this right now?
Well, you can hear what my
Okay,
item is, and the item is under closed session. I voted against the denial of the claim, and so the vote should be 5-1. Todd was not here, so 6 people here. And so somehow my motion to deny the claim was not one that
okay, so
I
the
didn't wanna-
action from
I didn't-
closed,
I didn't want to do it. I
action
didn't
from
want to be
closed,
doing.
yep, action from closed session should be modified to reflect what happened, which was a motion carried on a 5-1 on a roll call vote.
That's right.
Okay,
So
that
so
modification,
that went to the person sitting at the back of the room,
okay,
and she may not have heard me, or she may have been thinking of something else.
right.
We apologize for the error. We will correct the minutes.
All right, is there anything else? Otherwise, I would take a motion for this agenda, for the consent agenda
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as
as,
presented.
as modified.
Yes.
Second.
Second, you got it.
Okay, we'll have a vote, Nicola. I mean,
That
there,
was a second. Thank you.
okay,
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yeah,
Doss,
yes. Okay, the next item on our agenda is citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. And at this point in time, I would like to welcome our many guests tonight, who I believe are all students, or the majority of you are students. Tom, you're not a student unless I didn't know you were a student, but the majority in the gallery here are all students observing a meeting for a class at UW Platteville. So welcome, and that's what I'd say. All right,
May we
other comments?
ask the class name?
Is this introduction to infrastructure?
Okay.
Introduction to infrastructure. That's the majority of people we've had are for introduction to infrastructure. So, and I would like to congratulate the fire department on what appeared to be a very successful pancake breakfast and delicious pancakes on Sunday morning. Other comments or from any other council members?
You know what I think is really found that you guys are here today because of what happened in Baltimore. I'm sure that just shakes you guys, and so I think that I thank our team for considering a lot of infrastructure. We don't have that problem, but we do consider our citizens and our residents, and when we're pulling together our infrastructure. So I just want to acknowledge that, you know, moment of silence or prayers for those families that were lost. But I think it's really profound that you guys are here on the day that happened. Yeah.
All right, then we'll move on to the reports that were in the packet. There was a Board of Appeals for zoning. Todd, any additions or anything?
No additions, thank you.
Okay, Museum Board, Bob,
No additions.
accept? You don't have an addition for the Museum Board, but do you have any kind of announcement you'd like to make?
The last meeting, I made an announcement that the Cody Grabhorn is starting April 1st.
Right, and it's getting closer.
Yes. So, and so he is still starting April 1st.
Good. All right, action items then on our agenda tonight. We have first, the action award contract 2-24 West Adams Street reconstruction. Howard.
Thank you. This contract will be for water, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and street reconstruction of West Adams between Chestnut and Court Street to support the new fire facility. When this happened, we modified the scope of the project to include concrete repaving in the intersection of Adams and Chestnut to accommodate the fire trucks as they turn out onto the streets. Now, what that did was that ended up increasing the budget. Last time Alder Killian had specific questions regarding some technical details. And I believe I have all of the questions and answers listed in the summary packet here. We had an alternate bid to replace sanitary sewer on North Court Street. The alternate bid was not awarded by the Water and Sewer Commission. We had 5 bidders. Bill Lepke, a new bidder, was our low bidder. Delta 3 has done reference checks with some of the communities that they've done similar projects with. We have a full bid tabulation attached showing the contract prices. This project is over budget by a total of $47,600.92, but the Soden and Grace Street project came in significantly under budget, and there would be sufficient funds to cover this project. So we recommend that we award to Bill Lepke Excavating at the bid price, and savings from the Soden and Grace Street project cover the over budget amount.
Okay, questions? Ken.
Thank you, Howard, for answers to my 5 questions. Now, today, ironically, I was over by the old fire station, and there was a truck there from Delta 3. And so they were surveying over there, and they said they were going to be doing work in the future as far as the concrete over there. Now, what is gonna be, now that concrete that was put over there didn't last 50 years. So you're expecting now that this over at Owie Gray will last 50 years. Now, the difference is, what are you gonna do about the location over by the old fire station when there's water going underneath those buildings there? And that has weakened that area as far as the concrete. So can that answer come from you or Howard?
I'm going to start off, if you would, please, if I may, please. The East Main Street project that we have going on has two parts to it, kind of like the Camp Street project. The first portion of the project is for water and sanitary sewer, and that would be done by our city engineers, currently Delta 3 engineers. The street and pavement and storm sewer portion will be designed by Jewel Associates out of Spring Green, I believe it is, that they were selected to do the DOT portion of the project. And the intent is that when we redo that project, that the large storm sewer would be relocated out from underneath the building at 250 East Main as part of that project.
But that has nothing to do with this
No, I
project.
just,
That's a
so-
totally
So
separate
that's a
project.
totally separate project. It
But-
hasn't been designed or anything. So at this point in time, I think we probably should concentrate on our West Adams Street reconstruction. And as the project develops on East Main Street,
but I'd like
that
to
we would-
hear what the response is gonna be. So you're gonna take the water away from there. That's the future.
well, I think-
That will be the project a couple of years from now.
So that you'll be able to drive on there with big trucks, which is what is done now.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
okay, so let's return to the contract under discussion. That's contract 2-24, the West Adams Street reconstruction. Any questions on this contract? Okay, then do we have a motion?
I got a motion. I move to award contract 2-24 West Adams Street reconstruction to Bill Lepke at the price, or rather bid price of $327,600.92 with the savings from Soden and Gray Street project to cover the over budget amount in this project.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve contract 4-24 West Adams Street reconstruction. Nicola will vote.
Esper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Doss,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Gates.
Yes,
Motion carries.
Okay, next up is award contract 6-24 sidewalk repair.
Yes. We have our annual sidewalk repair contract. The base bid was for repairing sidewalk crossings of Pine Street and also including the northwest corner of Pine and Water by the Ruxton Apartments and replacing the ADA curb ramp in the southwest corner of Bonson and Main by Morrissey's Printing. There were alternate bids. However, with the bids that were submitted, we could only do the base bid. The low bidder is R&T Vogelli Excavating. They are a new contractor for us. Delta 3 has vetted this company, and we recommend awarding to this company at for the base bid only at the price listed.
Base price is 27,320. Okay, and this contract to this company is from where?
Monroe.
Okay, any questions on the sidewalk repair contract? Otherwise, I would take a motion on this contract.
I'll make a motion. I move to award contract 624 base bid only to RNT Vogali Excavating at the bid price of $27,320.20.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second to award contract 6-24 sidewalk repair. Nicola will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Gates.
Yes,
Motion carries.
Okay, now, next we have contract 10-24 weed and grass mowing. Howard.
Yes, thank you. This is for properties that require mowing due to non-compliance with our ordinances requiring lawns to be no more than 8 inches high. As corrected from last time, the code enforcement inspector will inspect properties and receive complaints regarding lawns. And when there's a property that has growth over 8 inches, the inspector places a door hanger and sends a letter to the owner. The owner and tenant have 5 days to comply. If it's still not mowed, we contact the contractor and then we bill the owner for the contractor cost plus a $50 administrative fee. We had one bid, Holman Lawn Care. They did the work last year and their costs this year are $90 per hour or $90 minimum. And staff recommends award.
Okay, questions on the contract for weed and grass mowing?
Question, Howard, and is this gonna include the no mow May thing that's been so popular? Are we gonna enforce this?
That's a separate thing that is being brought to the Plan Commission here next week.
And if we're not gonna mow in May, then why are we mowing the rest of the year? Just
Well,
question.
that's a question that
Guess what?
will be debated,
In the future.
that will be debated by the Plan Commission.
Very good.
Okay, any other questions about the weed and grass contract? Otherwise, I'd
I
take
do
a
have a
motion. Oh,
question.
okay,
Your listing of weeds, what other weeds do you include besides tall grass?
all weeds.
What tall grass? What about weeds? What weeds do you?
If
include?
necessary,
Is that in chapter 5?
if necessary, the contractor would remove weeds as listed in chapter 5 if a property owner does not comply with an order to remove those.
I didn't get time to read chapter 5, so I'm gonna do that and see what should be included. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion? I'll move to award contract 10-20. Okay, do I have a second?
Second,
Okay, motion by Kathy, seconded by Ken to award contract 10-24. Weed and grass mowing. Nicola will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Gates.
yes,
Motion carries.
Next, we have contract 12-24. This is alleys. Howard.
Yes, thank you. This would be for our alley paving and repairs. We intended to conduct 2 small projects. Hopefully, they were going to be within budget. First was to pave an alley from Roundtree to Alden Avenue without working on the sidewalk by Alden Avenue, but just repaving the alley. The other would be to repair a culvert head wall in an alley that extends from Water Street back to the property at 339 Water Street. We've looked at this. We were going to use street division crews to help reduce some of the costs. However, the low bid for the cost was over $53,000. What staff is recommending is that we reject the bids and we rebid by doing paving only for the initial alley that we were originally talking about, plus potentially other alleys that we can get within the actual budgeted amount.
Okay, questions on staff recommendation here?
I appreciate that the alley coming from Roundtree is going to be included in the future. Thank you.
Howard, you said this was over the bid price. The
Right.
combined bid was 53,000. What was our budget for this?
As I recall, it's 30,000.
$30,000.
Yes,
That's what I thought. So it's significantly over the bid amount.
yes, significant.
Okay, so the staff recommendation is to reject the bids on this alley, on alleys.
Contract. I'll move.
Contract 12-24.
I move to reject all bids for contract 1224.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, Ken and Todd, for contract 12-24. Nicola will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Arts,
Yes.
Gates.
This is an
Yes.
easy one.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next action item on our agenda is the lead service line replacement loan program.
Actually,
Howard.
item E, ma'am.
Pardon?
Item E is the next item on the agenda.
Oh, I missed it. Sorry. Then it would be the salvage contract, award limited salvaging rights to the OE Gray building. Sorry, Clint.
Madam President, as presented at the last meeting, the city issued a request for proposal for the purposes of selling the salvage rights of a limited materials of OE Gray building at 155 West Lewis Street in Platteville. It is the purpose of the RFP to obtain the best quality of service at the most favorable offered payment to the city of Platteville. The limitations that went into it were posted out with the RFP, the request for proposals. It included that the materials of the exterior envelope, the walls, windows, doors, roofing materials, superstructure pieces supporting these elements may not be salvaged or damaged during the salvage operations. The envelope must remain in place for concerns of public safety until demolition of the building. No materials may be salvaged that require enactment of our asbestos abatement plan, as we have not conducted that yet, and that the report would be provided to the awardee. Other structures, fencing, fixtures, and property outside of OE Gray building are not salvageable and must not be damaged during the salvaging as well. We did receive the one bid. It is a recommendation from staff to award the contract of the salvage rights of a limited materials of OE Gray building to Platteville Real Estate Investments LLC of Platteville, Wisconsin for the payment of $1,501. Madam President.
Okay, so this was limited salvage rights at OE Gray, and you've heard the restrictions. I might add that prior to issuing this RFP, our own staff did considerable work within the building, salvaging or repurposing, I guess, many items. And it was only after our internal staff reviewed again that we went out with a limited salvage right. So, so other questions on this?
I just a quick question. Is there a proposed timeline? This is approved today. Are they going to start this tomorrow or?
There is, I think we have the month of April marked out. We might be able to work with that. The person is going to be working with Shannon on making sure that the bottom line is this
It's
should not
soon.
interfere with
Okay.
demolition efforts.
All right.
Questions? Any other questions? Otherwise, I would take a motion.
I move to award a contract for the salvage rights of limited materials of the OE Gray building to Platteville Real Estate Investment LLC of Platteville, Wisconsin for the payment of $1,501.
Second,
All right, we have a motion by Bob and a second by Ken to award this contract for the salvage rights to Platteville Real Estate Investment LLC. Nicola will vote.
Esper,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Otts,
Yes.
Gates.
Yes,
Motion carries.
and I
And
have a question on this. What about the buildings as far as the potential purchase that we were working on? What is the status of that?
I believe he's talking about the other property.
The other properties, that there's a garage and another building.
We've yet to engage with the property owners. We're actually working with the title company to ensure that the property is clear and clean, as there is some discrepancies on description.
Future, if it goes through, there'll be salvage.
Salvage yeah, in the future, yes, we would not expect the
Maybe
property
yeah.
owner to provide. I don't think that clearing of the property, is that
No
correct?
building may have material which is of salvage use. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to then lead service line replacement loan program. Howard,
Thank you. We've done LSL lead service line programs since 2016. Until now, this program was funded with a special loan program that if we abided by all the rules, the DNR would forgive 100% of the loan, called principal forgiveness. So it became essentially a grant. This program had been limited to schools, licensed daycare facilities, and properties used for residential purposes. In that time, we provided up to $1,140 per LSL, with 515 locations awarded over $580,000. We still have 110 properties with known private side lead service lines. Of those, 3 are commercial properties. We passed an ordinance, I believe last year, or 2022 probably, to remove all LSL by the end of this calendar year. This year, funding is through the bipartisan infrastructure law. It expanded funding to all properties, but it has limited the program to a certain percentage of loan and principal forgiveness, or the grant portion. Based on the low to moderate income of our community, we have a 25% loan and 75% principal forgiveness. The entire amount is a loan, and then they will forgive 75%. This next paragraph has a little change to it. We received an email late yesterday that the city has received approval for the additional funding. So we would receive $170,140 with $127,605 forgiven and $42,535 as a loan at 0.25% interest. Based on questions regarding removal of lines, I have some of the following information. The US EPA drafted rules. They anticipate those to be finalized later this year. And some of those provisions include a goal of 100% lead pipe replacement within 10 years. Some other actions, one of the other critical ones is to lower the action level from 15 parts per billion to 10 parts per billion. It's unclear when that's going to happen. Currently the lead level for Platteville is 12.20. We're below the current standard, but we would not be below the proposed standard. Separately, the Wisconsin DNR, because of the lead levels and everything else, they're requiring the city to do optimal corrosion control treatment by injecting orthophosphates into our well water And that is required no later than September 25th, 2025. And then we have testing afterwards to ensure that the levels are being met. If we can show that there's no exceedance of the action level in 2 rounds of testing, 6 months apart, prior to September 25th, 2025, we will not be required to do that orthophosphate injection. For us, there's the cost of the orthophosphates and the cost to set up the chemical pumps and everything else. But we also have the other issue is that the water supply folks are telling us to add phosphorus to our water in the form of orthophosphates to our drinking water. And then the other hand, at the wastewater level is penalizing us with payments for exceeding phosphorus in our wastewater discharge. So it seems kind of strange to me that you got to do this, but then you got to pay even more to take it out or we'll penalize you. Okay. So those are some of the key factors and the reasons why we're doing some of this right now. But in order to receive this loan, we're required to pledge a revenue source for the loan repayment. There are 3 options. One is we pledge non-utility funds like GO debt or general fund reserves. We pledge that we will submit an application to the Public Service Commission to increase water rates, or we do an alternative revenue pledge with the loan repayments coming from those 110 property owners via special charge on the tax bill. I have some pros and cons of each listed in here, but staff recommends option 3, the alternative revenue pledge. But in order to qualify for that, we need to modify our current section 7.04 LSL replacement and create section 705 to establish an LSL utility to make this thing work. So what we have is we in essence have 4 different motions. One is that you approve option 3, and then if that is approved, then you would need to amend section 704 in the second motion, adopt section 705 in the third motion, and then staff is recommending that when we do this program for our citizens, that we establish an interest rate of 1%, establish an administrative fee of $50, and a repayment period not to exceed 3 years. One key fact in this is if the people who receive this pay it off in its entirety before November 1st, 2025, then none of it goes on the tax bill and everything is fine. So hopefully that's clear. And if not, Nicola can help with some of the technical aspects of the loan itself. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, questions? Kathy?
I have a number of them, but what if property owners choose not to do it?
According to our ordinance, after December 31st, 2024, the city has the option of turning their water off until they do.
Even though it's December? I'm
There-
just clarifying.
Well, there's a caveat in there. If they require water for heating their dwelling, then per Public Service Commission rules, we cannot turn it off during those months that would allow them to have heat in their building. But then once spring happened in spring of 2026 or 2025, then we could turn it off.
So were all the property owners that have this lead service made aware of this right away, or has this been sort of filtered down? Because I know a number of them have been done.
Yes.
Are these
we've
the
had-
ones that are coming late or
Yes,
Okay.
these are the ones that are coming late to the party. They've all been notified previously and given if the council approves this, we are prepared to send new letters that explain the new procedures and remind them of the deadline. But they've already had this sent to them in the past,
And how long ago would that have been?
a year at least. So this will be a reminder for all of them. But
So-
it's also on our website and everything else too.
so if we don't, basically, if we don't meet the deadline, we have to add chemicals to our,
That's correct.
And then we have to pay because
Have it
we will
go
have
from the
too
waste-
much phosphorus. And so then we'll not only have to add chemicals, but we'll have to pay because we're over phosphorused. I don't know if that's a
But-
word, but we'll just call it a
That
word.
question also, Howard, what are orthophosphates?
Orthophosphates?
Why would I want to drink it? You know, and how long does it take to run through our system? So everybody can run their faucets until we get this out of our system so we can drink healthy water again. I don't understand why we'd ever want to add something like that to our drinking water.
Actually, the city of Platteville did inject phosphates. I'm not sure whether they were polyphosphates or orthophosphates back in the late 1980s to mid 1990s. They were removed in the mid 1990s, just prior to me getting here because of other water quality issues. I'm sure Mr. Killian remembers some of those. But
What would they do for us by injecting? What is the DNR's hope?
what this does is it reduces the corrosion of lead from any lead left in the lead lines. What it does is it puts basically a coating on the inside of a lead line so that the water does not touch the lead in the lead pipe. And so then what that does is it significantly reduces the amount of lead that would get into the water.
Doesn't sound like something I want to drink. I mean,
It's-
just saying it, I know it's
it's
not your
safe.
fault, but yeah,
It's safe for consumption.
for now,
Yes.
as far as we know.
And I think that's why the Water and Sewer Commission over a year ago approved, and the council approved saying, we need these lead service lines done out.
Yes.
Because we don't want to have to add these kinds of things. Of course, it's always a balancing act between homeowners who may not want to replace because there's cost to it, but safety of the water for all. So it's kind of a balance between.
one final question, Howard, what is the approximate cost to a property owner to have that done? Do you know?
It varies. What we believe that our loan program will cover probably about 3/4 of the actual cost of the removal. Like I said, it varies depending on the conditions, whether or not they have to go underneath a driveway and replace a section of driveway, or how, there's lots of different variables, how far the house is from the road, things like that.
Or whether you have to go under a building.
Well, I mean, they're gonna have to go under the foundation a little bit, but if they have to go under a corner of a garage, for example, in order to get to it. There's many variables, but you know, for the standard house that goes from by the sidewalk into the house, this should cover about 3/4 of the cost.
So is there another option? Cause I mean, I Google everything and from what I'm reading, although it does create a barrier between the water and the lead, it still has, it's saying human beings aren't the only thing that it negatively impacts. So like, how long is there another option? Is there another option to doing this?
Howard, wouldn't the option that Howard has proposed is that we never get there because the lead service lines are replaced. So if we never get to
Injecting.
injecting, if we never get there because we bring our parts per billion down to 10 instead of where they are at 12.5, we do that by getting lead pipe, these things replaced, then we don't have to go to that step.
Right.
So I think that's
It's almost like the whole class gets punished if you don't do your homework, right? Okay. Okay. All right.
So is this round of funding pretty similar to what has been available in the past? Like have the property owners endured a cost in past programs? Okay.
Yes. Most of the property owners had to provide some skin in the game, if you will, for their lead lines. Some of them did not, but most did.
I recall it was around 30% or so, wasn't it? It's around a number out there that the homeowner.
Well, our estimate was 25 to 30, 25% or so.
The estimate was around $380. Is that correct? I mean, on
That's-
average.
That's totally separate. What I'm saying is that the $1,540 that are the what used to be $1,140, which would be increased. I don't. Yeah, $1,520 is what we're loaning to people. That should cover about 3/4 of the cost of replacement.
Okay.
But then they will have to pay us back that $380 as the 25% of that amount.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Okay, so I think the question tonight is whether or not we want option one, which is we basically add this to the general fund and tax everyone for this. That would be the non-utility fund pledge. The second option would be to make a water utility fund pledge because we have to have a revenue source. So the water utility fund revenue pledge would involve spreading the cost over all people who pay water rates and would also involve having to establish a new water rate. Is that correct, Nicola?
Well, yeah, in option 2, you can see there really is, from staff perspective, no pro to this, but we could apply. The application process is intensive, takes very many months. And there's no guarantee that if we applied that the PSC would approve the request. So option 2 is a little bit of a question mark, would take a lot of time.
And then option 3 is this alternative revenue pledge, which actually has the homeowner paying it and requires them for us to also adopt some ordinance changes, amending section 7.04 of ordinance 2404, creating section 7.05 of ordinance 2405, and then establishing an interest rate, a payment, a period, and an administrative fee. So I guess the question is, are you ready to select a revenue source and to move forward on that and to make a motion?
I would want to make a statement first. I'm in favor of the option 3 but would also encourage staff to make sure that those property owners are notified as soon as possible what the deadline is, so that I really don't want chemicals added to the water supply. So with that, I'll move to adopt alternative revenue pledge option 3 for the lead service line replacement program.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Nicola will vote on that.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Doss,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Bots,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, following that, then we have to amend and create some language. So the next one that I would ask for is adopting ordinance 2404, amending section 7.04 of the Platteville Municipal Code.
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I move to adopt ordinance 2404, amending section 7.04 of the Platteville Municipal Code.
okay, we have a motion by Bob and a second by Kathy. Nicola will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Bots,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, the next then would be a move to adopt ordinance 2405 and create section 7.05 of the municipal code, authorizing any lead service replacement loan as a special charge and lien on the subject property.
I'll make a motion. I move to adopt ordinance 24-05, creating section 7.05 of the Platteville Municipal Code, authorizing any LSL replacement loan as a special charge and lien on subject property.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, Todd and Lynn. Nicola will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Bots,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
motion carries.
And the final motion needed for this is then establishing an interest rate, an administrative fee, and a repayment period for these loans.
That the interest rate be 1%, an administration fee of $50, and a repayment period not to exceed 3 years.
Second it.
A motion by Kathy, second by Todd, and Nicola will vote.
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Bots,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay,
Um,
thank you. And we, Howard, Kathy talked about the property owners being informed as soon as possible. I'm assuming that all of the regional plumbers have already been informed. Because I'm
Not able to,
I'm concerned that there's enough plumbers to do 151
We
lead
have,
service
we have a
lines.
communication plan meeting scheduled for Thursday with
Okay,
Howard and Jody.
great. Okay,
Before we go on, could we return to the museum minutes just for a second, please?
the museum minute.
Yeah, you gave me a big chance. You did everything but like grab my ears and shake my head. And I still missed it. But since Cody's starting next week, I would like to commend Angie Wright. Yes, she not only did her own job, she was the interim museum director during this break between directors. And the operations of the museums has not missed a beat.
Thank you.
And she did her own job, so she did two jobs. And
So
good-
thank you, Angie.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, let's then go on to the last action item on our agenda tonight. This is the loan extension with Fidelity Bank and Trust. Joe.
Yes, so back in 2015, the city and the redevelopment authority both provided loans to assist with building improvements and facade repairs to the building at 25 East Main Street. That would be with LMN Investments, the building owner. So these were set up at that time as basically the loans were amortized over 20 years with a 7-year balloon payment with the idea that they would refinance at that period. So in 2022, when those were due, the owners came forward and said, well, we don't have adequate equity at this point to do a refinancing. So they requested it and were granted a 2-year extension to those loans. So the 2-year extension ends this year, next month, actually. So they are in the process of working with their private lender to take on additional private debt on that. So pay off hopefully all, but at least a portion of that debt with the city and RDA. But that whole finance package with their private lender has not been finalized yet. So we're working through that process. So the issue we've got is the RDA did their loan through their own funds, but the city took a loan out with Fidelity Bank and Trust and then did a pass-through loan from those funds to LMN. So our financing with Fidelity was basically mirrored to that. So we also have a balloon payment coming due next month. So in order to provide additional time for LMN to go through their private financing and then bring back, a request to us as far as paying down their loans, we have requested an extension to Fidelity Loan and Bank and Trust regarding the city's loan with them, basically so we have time to go through that whole process. So Fidelity Bank and Trust did come back. So our current debt is $107,201.15. So they came back with a proposal for a 2-year extension at 7.75%. And then they provided 2 different options as far as the amortization. So they could basically continue with the current amortization schedule, which would be basically over an additional 12.4 years. But since it's a higher interest rate, the payments would go up. So it'd be $1,116.63 would be the payment. The option 2 would essentially extend the amortization out farther to keep the loan payments basically where they are now. So it'd be in the range of $875.21. With either option, the city would have the right to pay off all or a portion of that loan prior to the full 2 years. So basically the option 1 would be a higher payment, but it would also be paying down the principal. Option 2 would be a lower payment, but would essentially just be paying interest. So staff's recommendation would be to do the 2-year extension at 7.75% with the option 1. So we would be having some payment of that principal as we're going down. So as I mentioned, this would basically just be biding time so we can get a package from LMN as far as their loan. So that will be a future discussion as far as our loan to LMN. That'll be hopefully next month or the month after that when they have all their information from the bank. So this would just be an extension between the city and Fidelity Bank and Trust. Any questions?
Questions? Kathy?
Okay, so the fine print though, is that if these people do not pay this back, taxpayers will have to. Is that
Well,
correct?
yes, but that's a separate issue that we're not considering LMN's loan at this point.
I realize that
Yeah.
what we're looking for is the extension for the city piece.
Right, right.
But I
right now, we
believe
just
when
have
they
to-
came 2 years ago and asked for that extension, have they been consistent with their payments?
They are behind a month or two, I believe, at this point. But they are making payments again. They got behind and then they're making payments. So they're current with their payments, but they never caught up from when they got behind.
So at some point, we're going to be, you said, is that in a month when we're going to be talking
Well,
about
you
what?
requested
deal-
60-day extension. But, I don't know. That's between them and their finance company as far as how long that takes.
Question, if in the end, things don't work out, we end up owning the building then, if we make the payments?
Well, that gets very messy because we are not the primary lender on that property. So in order for us to foreclose on that debt, we would have to buy out the primary lender. So my opinion, I don't think we want to go down that road. So I think we need to be considering any options available to keep them in a position where they can keep making payments to us. Like I said, right now, we're just trying to buy time with Fidelity. Otherwise, we've got to pay them off next month.
Any other questions? So this would be approving a 2-year loan extension with Fidelity Bank and Trust in the amount of $107,475.54 at a rate of 7.75 and payment of $1116.63 a month, continuing the current 12.4-year amortization. And if we don't approve this, then the city would be required to do that balloon payment during the month of April.
Correct.
I have a motion.
Okay,
Motion to approve a 2-year loan extension with Fidelity Bank and Trust in the amount of $107,475.54 at a rate of 7.75% with a payment of $1,116.63 and continuing the current 12.4-year amortization.
Second.
okay, we have a motion by Todd and a second by Bob. Nicola will vote.
Esper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop. Arts,
Yes.
Gates.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And Joe, I'm sorry, I I thought we were going to the information and discussion section of the meeting earlier, also Barb.
Oh.
I didn't mean to interrupt in the middle of the
No,
action.
that's fine.
I didn't see that final action item.
No problem. Okay, information and discussion, that completes the action portion of our agenda. Now we're in information and discussion. The first item on our information and discussion tonight is the resolution involving Tide and recommendations to the council. So we will call first on Clint.
Thank you, Madam President. In your packet, you'll see in the digital copy, beginning on page 93 to 113, or I'm sorry, 133, staff notes and supporting materials. There is not much change to the staff note or materials, but I do want to remind everybody, we did talk on this on the last meeting. We decided that we were going to bring it back in this meeting, and if we had concerns and questions and such that were brought forward from the community, that we would list it again as an information discussion, which we have. I want to thank Steve also, who gave us some publicity on this item in our last meeting, which helped bring some awareness to it and bring out and tease out some concerns that came from the community. Tonight, I want to share with you some observations, some of the challenges the task force faced in their tasking, as well as specifically address some of the concerns regarding the initiatives, and then talk on the proposed approach with the initiatives that are on here. If I do this appropriately, there should be a time in the meeting where everybody feels slightly uncomfortable and kind of squeamish, because many of these things do resonate on our personal values and self-identity. So I'm going to start off here, and you've been forewarned. So here we go. Obviously, this is a political type of an issue. It's dealing on impacts of many things we just do, and we've addressed where we draw a line in the sand, and some folks are on this side and some folks are on this side. Some folks are standing over both sides and some are to the sideline. In that same sandbox, everybody's trying to convince each other on, where they should be or expressing who they are. It's political because we're deciding who gets what, or who gets less, or who gets more, which it deals with different funding and different recognitions. It deals as a political issue because you're talking about concepts like majority rule, minority rights. It's a political issue because it deals with utilitarianism on trying to sort out what's perhaps the bestest for the mostest, or a Raolism type of initiative on what is bestest for the mostest in needs. So with that set up on why this becomes political, I'd like to first share with you some of the observations I've had on the different perspectives. Now, in fair warning, these are terrific overgeneralizations, but they're kind of based on reoccurring and repetitive type of themes that I've tried to capture in a bottle. So excuse me if they're offensive and they are stereotypical, but these are things that have been expressed in some way, shape, or form. So the first perspective I feel like is out there and has engaged in conversations is that assault on identity. And this is perhaps from a multi-generational local community member perspective. And again, this is certainly not everybody, but it's a reoccurring type of a theme that sounds to the tune of, we like our culture, our values. Others are welcome to join us here and live as we live, but we're not interested in inviting others here to tell us how we are wrong and to accommodate others at the cost of our identity or our values. And typically this is kind of touching on bits of race, on socioeconomics, nationalities, those types of things. Another perspective, and again, this is an overgeneralization, but again, it touches on some types of repetitive themes, is perhaps from a U.S. citizen migrating here or from a migrant foreign-born community member, and responding to that to the extent of, well, like your parents and your grandparents, we're moving here for the safety and security of our families and for our opportunities. We have the freedom to be here, and we have our own cultures and histories like the ones your families brought with them. Why do we have to cast ours off in the great melting pot that is the United States of America? And again, an overgeneralized perspective, but some of those themes are reoccurring. Yet another perspective is a perspective of liberation for their identity. With DEI initiatives and recent changes in legislation, without them, I couldn't be who I am in the ways that others get to be who they are, whether it's who I choose to love or how I wished others to address me. Another perspective that is brought to the table, again, is an overgeneralization, but it kind of becomes reoccurring, is that perspective on the appropriateness of DEI for our community. That notion that we're not Madison, meaning that we don't have an abundance of folks from multicultures and diverse backgrounds. And to that kind of an extent, it's DEI does more dividing of a small community than bringing us together because it only wants to focus on our differences and not our likenesses. We have limited resources and they need to be focused on efforts for everyone to benefit and not directed at specific groups. DEI in our community is a solution that is going to make problems. For some, DEI has become associated with a range of different social theories, which may support or oppose individual perspectives. And so again, these are, very generalized, but types of reoccurring concerns, fears, and hopes that are kind of associated in the DEI perspective of seeing it as a symbol and what that means to different folks. The immediate question that comes in a lot of our conversations too is that why does DEI invoke such emotions? And again, I'm not a professor and I'm not a social theorist by any means, but from my observations, the first thing is why is it quickly becomes an us versus them, like many of our political issues that we have here that we engaged in tonight. But it often has context that allows for implications, allegations, inferences of a victim and assailant type of a relationship with some of the conversation pieces. The exercise of politics allows for some more than others, and when those contexts on conversation happens, it allows for folks to easily feel like they have to take the defensive. There's a sense of mistrust, and then there's often becomes an inference on an opposing view's intentions. Another item on why this invokes emotion, again, in my observation, is it impacts self-identity. It involves discussions specifically on views, norms, limitations, perspectives, cultures, preferences, traits that may be contrary. And so again, it allows us to feel very defensive and a sense of mistrust. Another reason is it involves social comparison often. When we talk about different groups that are impacted disparately or unequally or in a minority type of a group, it can quickly invoke a sense of, hey, what about me? Or what about this other group that we're not specifically talking about right now with this type of an issue? An example of that that was brought forward and is brought forward or was brought forward from comments from citizens and has also been touched on multiple meetings that I've been attended to is the sense of equity in DEI and whether or not to you it means equity is a quality in being able to access a service or if it's an equality in the outcome of that service. Essentially, are we treating folks without view of race, color, creed, or are we taking into account that they are coming from different backgrounds and at different levels and trying to accommodate in reaching the same type of an outcome? And again, that leads to debate again on where you are on those types of issues and how you see that. Another item that again invokes a lot of emotion as you start looking at history and practices of discrimination, whether it's conversations on slavery in the United States, Jim Crow laws that impacted folks until the 1960s, impacts on members of the LGBTQ community, human trafficking and exploitation of migrant community members, certainly not all inclusive, but there's also lingering aspects that these have on individuals and communities. Another aspect that invokes emotions is a very kind of an inhumane type of a look on things and something that often gets unspoken is you start looking at it in a cost benefit analysis. It costs money, administrative time, accommodations, education. You end up with split views and opinions on essentially a cost benefit. As an example of if we're accommodating and want to bring in inclusivity in those things for a labor force thing, does that balance against the social support that it might require? And again, folks coming from a community, are they contributing more to the community or is there more benefit going to them, whether it's through a subsidized housing, education? And this is going to be hard for me to say, but I'm going to say it. It's also the fear on when you're dealing with socioeconomics, are you scaring off wealthy people? And that is a concern that gets brought forward. It deals typically, again, with different stereotypes of views on folks that are moving to the communities that are of diverse types of backgrounds. But if you are doing that, it has financial implications. So those are other things that, again, that evoke emotional responses when you're talking about topics like this. Obviously, there's partisan implications. And if you're into different partisan newses and those types of things, DEI gets branded in different lights and is brought forward in different contexts. Overall, it's a topic which many have an opinion on, and yet still many feel reluctant in expressing their opinions for the sake of facing opposition for their views, because they do invoke such emotions with it, and because they feel like there's going to potentially be retaliation on bringing their views if it's not matching up with a majority in a room that they're in at that present time. Specifically, some of the concerns and such that were brought forward on the initiatives that you see in front of you tonight. The first one included concerns on using DEI using DEI in the name. The concerns are that DEI invokes divisiveness and pulls the community apart, as kind of expressed through some of the perspectives I tried to capture earlier. It suggested that perhaps the committee could have a different name, examples given of building a better Platteville, better together. The response and retort I would have this in discussion with the task force when this was brought forward from them as a recommendation was exactly that. There was conversation on whether or not to stay with a DEI name or go with a name more of a welcoming type committee. Overall, the talking points led to the talking point of, well, are we talking in euphemism if we want to call it something else? And essentially that's what it is as a DEI committee. My opinion as an manager and administrative person for your policy is that I appreciate that names and symbolisms are powerful. There's a pragmatic sense also to this, to the fact that I'm concerned on the functions of that committee is kind of defined on the front of the staff notes, that the committee is there to review the progress reports and provide oversight to the city manager's delivery of the adopted DEI initiatives, to evaluate DEI topics and provide reports and recommendations to the Common Council as requested, and to conduct public meetings with listening sessions focused on DEI topics. So in changing the name, if that suffices in helping remove political barriers and those types of things and gets us to there, to me, my focus is on those types of functions. For the next specific items from the initiatives, it was suggested that there was suggestions of changes to the inclusivity statement. I think the concerns in general senses came again on using that the language and the idea of equity and whether or not that is an access of an equality of access versus an equality of outcome. A solution was to preserve inclusivity and diversity type language, but remove equity sentences and task force sentences. The retort to that is certainly consider that language and creeds and value statements are a baseline when we start setting policy and planning, and they often get referenced in our debates that we have when we're trying to establish what it is we want to do. My opinion on that as a manager is if you're interested in amending the language of the inclusivity statement, I would recommend that that be done in a work session type of a format where you decide on what process that you'd want to go in place on revising that and what components you'd like to see changed. Trying to work out wordsmithing through Robert's rules in a meeting like this, as you know, can be done, but it is not probably the most efficient way in trying to arrive at where you want to be at. Number 3, continuing with observed holidays. As in the handbook, there was concerns that the addition of MLK and Juneteenth as observed holidays and for closures of businesses would have negative impacts on twofold on reducing services provided on those days to the community. And then second, leading to a divisive type of a nature where those two holidays being focused at a demographic of an African American, and then now what are we going to do if we have folks from Hispanic communities or from LGBTQ communities or from Jewish communities or those other things that want to have that recognition? Are we setting precedents? And I guess my retort in response, or I'm sorry, the solution to that was to keep things as the same. Right now, staff has access to 4 floating holidays and working with folks to make sure that if they want to observe those, they can take those off. I guess the retort that would come from it, from the talking points that I've gathered, is that observance of legally ending slavery and ensuring civil rights in the country is a big accomplishment for everybody. It does have national recognition, but again, that's not to say that the city of Platteville has to recognize federal holidays and that we do recognize all the federal holidays. So overall, my opinion or my recommendation on this is that we currently operate with 4 holidays. If we take those off, it doesn't come to us as a cost impact from a budgetary standpoint, because I would recommend that we would then take those off and then still allow employees to have 2 floating holidays for observance of other types of festivals, cultural events, significance to their choosing. Item number 4, concerns with time for the administrator and impacts on the city manager. How much time and effort will this take? And I appreciate the thoughts on that and understanding that we do have very full plates. Currently with the Tide Task Force, the meetings have lasted 90 minutes and there's one each month. With preparation time and estimates of my time and Director Lee Jones's together, estimate of investing 4 to 6 hours of staff time a month in Tide efforts. With the new committee, if it were to be approved, I would like to see that at more of a quarterly type of a function. And in completing those initiatives, I would still guess, maybe in a realm of 4 to 6 hours a month are dedicated towards achieving those initiatives and planning those meetings. 4 to 6 hours in a month, you're looking at 72 hours annually out of 2,080 hours. That arrives at about 3.5%. Concerns on the compensation of the committee. It was also brought concerns on should we have specified folks representing demographics, somebody there specifically advocating on behalf of Hispanic communities. It was also recommended consideration for elderly population, disabled populations. That would be okay. That's not completely out of the ordinary. With ADRC functions on the county side of the house, there's typically folks that are brought in to advocate for certain types of perspectives, whether they're directly affiliated with that or second hand of family members providing care of someone, those types of things. Challenges that we would have to take into account, though, is you'd have to decide on, okay, which communities do you want to have with a assigned seat at the table, and then can we fill those with those folks? So overall, then, these are again the different concerns that are on the specific issues. Just as important on what it is that you want to do, the question often comes then and is how are you going to do it? And as I mentioned last meeting, my approach to this is more so of a sense of mindfulness in others and manners and service delivery. Do I think that there's huge gaps in our approach to delivering services? I don't, but at the same time, there's certainly always room for improvements. Many of the community challenges that came forth, as you saw in the report, are in the realm of health and human services, which includes then making sure that we're engaging in those conversations to try to beat disparity, to alleviate problems that are going to stem over into law enforcement, that are going to stem into other types of community problems. Do I think if we act on these DEI initiatives that it's going to take us to an extreme of being considered an ultra-liberal community set on dismantling historically successful systems with a runaway type of budgets? I really don't. I think the things that are in here are put in context of exploring and initiating and put into the extent of being feasible for us and looking actually for funding sources to help manage those things. At the same token, if the council decides that, this is not the time and place right now, we feel like we cannot do these, does that mean that we're a paleoconservative, oppressive type of a community? I don't think that either. I think that we may fall behind the bell curve when it comes to mindfulness, which may impact attracting families in such of a diverse type of a background. But I think that it doesn't overlabel the different types of derogatories that might be brought into the extreme part of a conversation. The one thing that is, certainly that everybody agrees on is that change is going to be constant for us, no matter how the Platteville community wants to progress from a public standpoint through policy. A lot of the things are outside of our policy control, and it really comes down to us to try to facilitate through different initiatives that we can put in place. And through a mechanism like this, I think it does give the council an ear to the ground on changes and discussions that are happening to allow you to control things on, are we progressing too fast? Are we progressing too conservatively? Do we need to regress in some of these types of initiatives, and to be able to have that discourse? There is, again, the recommendations brought forth, in my opinion, are incremental. They move the barometer in slow increments and that are digestible. Another experience that I had is when you're working with the task force was brought forward specifically to have us evaluate and essentially criticize and bring different perspectives to us. And it's not always comfortable to listen to those things, because a lot of these things are hinged on behaviors and how we interact with people, where in other conversations, they kind of get hidden behind masks of money appropriations and these other things. And the conversations can be uncomfortable when you talk about these. Having been a part of these and conversations here, conversations with task force, community conversations, I still stand behind the recommendations as brought forward. I think that if they do not work out or they're not working out, you would have representation from this body with that group to understand that. It can be brought back and tweaked. And the question then comes now, the 4 parts of the things that are being asked is kind of implicitly to accept the recommendations as of Tide brought forward, and to kind of complete that mission with Tide, and with receiving it, it disbands Tide. The adopting, amending, or rejection of the recommendations that are brought forward. The third is the creation of a body, if so choose, and then amending, maintaining, and or retracting inclusivity statement as seen fit. And I'm sorry that was quite a lot of thoughts all jammed into 3.5 minutes, but thank you, Madam President.
Okay. This is up for discussion tonight. Do any of our members who were Bob, you were on the task force?
Yes.
Lynn, you were on the task force? Anything you guys would like to add or say?
Yeah, a little. Sometimes I think the phrase DEI and DEI initiatives was used without having real concrete objectives. I think some of the things that we came up with on that committee were focused more on, I guess, helping the community as a whole know more about activities and events going on in town. And with that said, I think some of the initiatives may just be more common sense than true DEI things. Like one was to have community resources put into a community resource pamphlet that's not only available in print form, but also on the city's website. That's something every community should do, and I don't see that as being a real DEI initiative, as just being more transparent, but also promoting things going on in town. I guess one concern I had was with the proposal of auditing the city policies and like the city physical structures. If I understand correctly, when city policies are created, they go through kind of a system of checks and balances to look at things and make sure things are fair and inclusive. And so I don't really know if it'd be necessary to bring in an outside agency to audit things, because it seems like if policies have not been brought forward as being unfair or uninclusive, then I don't know if it's necessary to relook at all of the policies written in our city manuals. As for like and I think, Clint, when you're writing things, you fair and inclusive and
As a feasible solution, I would see it as when we are reviewing policy, that we would have a checklist in place to kind of be, to have an awareness and a mindfulness again on evaluating based on these criterias as well.
physical stuff. I know we have to go by ADA compliance on any new construction. And so, and I think as far as existing construction goes, we can sort of eyeball things and see where we can make improvements with signage or lighting, having an outside agency audit stuff. So I think that cost doesn't need to really be taken on, because it doesn't seem that necessary. I do think a lot of the suggestions were good, and I think the task force had the city as a whole in mind. Accessible and improved services for all people. I didn't feel there was ever a need for cast off their cultures. I don't think that was being asked. Task force. One thing that I was a little, I don't know if concerned is the word. It seems like a lot of the things that were brought up had to do with needs people have. Housing needs, food needs, and I'm not always sure that those are under the purview of city government, as opposed to more things like Wisconsin Department of Health Services or the Grant County Social Services. I can see it'd be good to coordinate things and to promote programs already off. So those were just some of the thoughts I had about what we were doing as the task force, and good ideas, but I think sometimes without knowing what's already existing. So
Do you have any?
So real quick, this weekend, I watched a movie and it was called Shirley. And I only watched it because it was Regina King, and I love Regina King. I didn't really realize how important and how relevant it would be to this conversation, but I'm going to use it as an example. Shirley was about a woman in history, Shirley Chisholm, and I believe it was the 60s. She was running for Congress, and she was pretty vocal, like somebody else on this board, on the committee. She's pretty vocal for things of change. She stood up for change. She fought. They wanted her to run for president. She lost. You guys interested? Watch the stories on Netflix. What comes to mind when I think about that for me is when I moved to Platteville, I knew what I was moving into. I knew that I was the coffee in a bucket of cream. I understood that, but I love Platteville and it's a family environment. For that, I knew that there were diversity committees where I came from. And what I saw there, I didn't see here. People are nice. People are very sweet. Okay, that's good. But there are communities here who need to know that their are people that really stand up for them. And if you don't stand up for me because it's in your heart, you're standing up and representing because it's part of a protocol. And so when I think about that, I totally love, I thought city manager was gonna start preaching. And then I get what you're saying. But when I look at it, I take it as what I hear from people. I'm a sounding board and I take it from what I see. The need to have a DEI committee or representation on a protocol is extremely important right now because Platteville is becoming a large melting pot. We need to let people know that they are welcome, not just call it a welcome committee, but put things in place that the students who are learning protocol and people who've come from places where there are processes already put in place don't feel like they've been brought back to the 50s. So I think that as we move forward, as things are changing, that we need to stay within the times and we need to make it as important to us as the infrastructure, because I always say that the people are the infrastructure. We are who are making Platteville who it is. When the kids go and they win all these things, it's not because we have the new field. It's because those kids are working hard at it. When they're getting those good grades, these are the people who need to understand that yes, I am accepted for who I am and that there is stuff in place in my city for me. And so I totally feel the need for it. I totally want to overlook like all of the other old issues or whatever. Let's address this newness, not just because of who I am, because I'm not just because of me, but because of those kids that I work with at the schools, the people that live in the people that are coming here, that are moving here, that are going to continue to make Platteville flourish. So I think we have to at least, if it doesn't have to be a big budgetary change. It could be. I'm with Ken. I want $10,000, but to move some streets. But I just think putting it in place would at least let the rest of Platteville know that that we do care, that everything that we say when you come in here and see that, listen, when I first moved here and I talked to the school board because I wanted to see what my kids would get because I was homeschooling them and I didn't see any African-American kids on those brochures. I started fighting then. Every time I go through the 53818 or something that shows the outsiders or people here, what Platteville is, when I don't see a child in a wheelchair, when I don't see kids, people of color, when I don't see it, it bothers me because we're here and we want people to know that we are comfortable here. So why not add it to, why do we have to have a meeting about, did you put any African American or Oriental children in the, when they're here, if we're here, let's treat them like that. And so, yes, if at this level, there are things that, like you said, that the Grant County could take care of. There are, but why not make it important to us so that Grant County knows that we want this to happen? And so that's how I feel about it.
I have something to say. I'd like to take you back to November of 1988 at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, outside of the 2nd of the 327th Infantry Division. Soldiers had gathered at 5 o'clock in the morning to do physical training as they did many days. And oftentimes the groups of soldiers would gather in groups based on race. Black soldiers would stand in certain groups and white soldiers would stand in others. Along came First Sergeant Williams. He grew up the child of a sharecropper in Louisiana. He had absolutely nothing. He fought in Vietnam. He spent his entire life in the Army. He abruptly started walking around and taking white soldiers from groups and putting them with blacks and black soldiers in white groups. And in the end, he stood everybody up and he said, listen, a lot of people have died for us not to be segregated. Stop segregating yourselves. I look at some of these initiatives as attempts to segregate. And I think we need to be very careful about that and to remember it's a free country. You can believe what you want to believe. I'm going to believe what I want to believe, irregardless. I don't think a committee is necessary. I think if we keep with the precepts of our country, which is freedom, and that we're all together, I think it becomes completely unnecessary. Thank you.
Yes. Want to just make a few comments. I realize this is a very difficult and very passionate subject. I have to admit, it's supposed to been 2 weeks that we've had this report and had an initial conversation. The Tide Task Force, I think, was created, what, 2 years ago? So they have had 2 years to put this together. And I'm not 100% sure that we as a council have had time to absorb all of the information because it wasn't piecemealed back to us. It came in one big report. Because most of us weren't on that task force. I think they did a great job. It was a lot of work. I commend you. But when I look at it from a city perspective, and I had a lengthy conversation with Clint, it's sort of like, we need to address it, but I think that 2 weeks ago, when it was on for information, and then the article came out in the Journal last week, I was absolutely flooded with phone calls from community members. I couldn't go anywhere, but I went to Piggly Wiggly one day, I think it was Saturday, to get groceries, figuring I'd be back in a half an hour. 3 people stopped me, and that's what they wanted to talk about. And different components or whatever, and their general comment is, so what are you going to do? I was like, this is just coming to us. So the first thing I want to comment about, it's going to take us some time as a council to absorb this. And I, for one, would like to hear more from the community, because it is going to impact the community. And I think there's some education components about DEI that maybe we need to look at. So I think maybe the bottom line is, and I'm going to extend my comment by a little bit. I was actually accused of being raised in a cocoon because I'm an old white woman from a rural area in Wisconsin. So I'm in a cocoon. I'm not aware of what the outside world is. Well, I'm Platteville native, been here for decades. In my family, I have Black, Ecuadorian, Argentinian, Canadian, even have a few Texans. I have people on both sides of the political spectrum. I have divorced family. I have trans family. I have gay family. I love them all. So just because that I'm originally from here, this is my hometown. Yeah, I haven't been wrapped in a cocoon. I am aware I don't live that life. I don't live day to day like some of the others do, but I did not appreciate being accused of not understanding. And I just want to make that point. And so I don't know out there if any other community members have been approached that way, but that's a real turnoff. That is a real turnoff, but I turned it into an education piece because that's what I came back with. It's like, just because we live in rural Wisconsin doesn't mean that we're not aware that there's not issues. And I personally work hard every day and always have to make Platteville the type of community that it is. And I'm very proud of it. And back in the day, when I was at the chamber, we started a committee called Platteville Welcomes You with exactly that intent. It was a takeoff on the old welcome wagon program that they had, because we wanted to make everybody that moved to the city, to our community, to feel welcome. And another thing that I initiated was and I'm not sure it's the document that has been produced now for the, what is it called?
A community resource guide?
Yes, I created one at the chamber. for that reason, because I knew community people needed to have that kind of a resource. So sorry to be a little testy, but I just want, that aspect out there that we are a community made up of people that are aware that we're not perfect. I don't know any anywhere. But some of the recommendations from both the task force and the recommendations coming down to us to review now, I want time to actually consider whether it's a community issue and something that the community can work on, or if it's actually something for your city government to be doing.
Other people with comments. Otherwise, I do have someone from the community who would like to speak and who has registered with a green sheet.
I just want to say that, going off of some of the other things that were said, this has all been here. It's been here for hundreds of years. It's not like, the issues being raised and the discussions we're having are these brand new discussions. It's here. People are living here. They have been living here. And, I think for a long time, it's been easy to, these people have been trying to have their voices heard, have been trying to say things. And, I think for a variety of reasons, it's been easy to not hear them as much as we should. And, I think one of the things that's happening now is that those voices are getting louder. There's more voices. People are coming together. And I think it feels all of a sudden like, wow, this is a shock. Like, where is this coming from? But it's been here. Issues have been going on. As Lynn said, there's a lot of different cultures and people that live in Platteville. And when you only see one group all the time, I can see how other people might not feel welcome, might not, feel like they're included in this community. So I think, it's, again, this isn't something new. This isn't something that all of a sudden is being sprung upon us. I think now we're in a point where we need to listen. And I think, a lot of people are fed up and, want people to start listening to their perspectives and how they've been impacted.
I will go back to, we have one person in the audience who's filled out a green sheet to talk. So Royal, would you? I don't have a clue what the other thing is.
Propose that idea.
I think we're on the, I don't know. Yeah, talk about Tide. Talk about this.
I wanted to at least bring that other piece up.
Introduce yourself first and your
Thanks.
address.
Yep. I'm Royal Palmer. I live at 127 East Main Street. I also am the co-owner of Driftless Market at 95 West Main Street. I'm also the president of the Southwest Wisconsin Rainbow Alliance and a proud member of the Tide Task Force. So a few things that I hadn't really prepared a speech. I just wanted to come to support and really nail down that as a current member of the task force, I am dedicated and very passionate about continuing my work on the task force. If it be named a committee, I would hope to and continue my efforts. To insinuate that you're surprised and you need time to digest tells me that you are looking at life through a very small lens. And also that you're not putting a ton of critical thought into these types of political and racial issues. You've had plenty of time to think about it. You've had plenty of time to see it, to acknowledge it. And what's happening is it feels like we like to ignore it. And if we just maintain status quo, maybe the problem will go away. That's just not going to happen. And to insinuate that we should all just be able to, by default, get along because one guy, made a group of two different races intermingle, is also very short-sighted. Platteville is my new home. I used to live in Minneapolis, and I want to be able to be proud of calling Platteville a very diverse community that treats all of their residents with equal opportunities. And there are a lot of voices who are so frustrated from not being heard that sometimes they stop talking. And we can't let that happen. We have to be the voices for those who are not willing to stand up here like myself and talk about it. Mostly, I would be really disappointed if the Tide task force were to be considered unnecessary. Just the idea that maybe we don't need it is reason enough to tell me that we really need it. Because if you think you don't need to address the problem, you're part of the problem. I don't have a lot more to say on that note, but I would really like to talk about a hands-free potential law to be put into place for our downtown, specifically Main Street. The amount of people that I see texting and driving every day is scary. There are other states that already have made it law. Wisconsin has not made it a law to be hands-free, but there's no reason that Platteville can't be the first to do that, or maybe follow other cities that already have in Wisconsin. But if we truly value our residents, we need to do more. We need to do more. There's a fact here that I wrote down that's, this doesn't necessarily mean Main Street because the speed limit is quite low, but driving at 55 miles per hour while sending or reading a text message is the equivalent of driving the entire length of a football field with your eyes closed. And so if you're good at driving with your eyes closed, I mean, I commend you, but I just think it's time that the council, along with the police, really start to look at what we can do to start minimizing the amount of texting and driving that's happening. It's an epidemic of our downtown area specifically. I live and work on Main Street, and so I see it every day when I walk to work, and it's just bad.
Royal, I have a
Okay,
question
thank
for
you,
you if you're
Royal.
done. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You've made a decision that some of us are looking through this through a small lens, that we lack critical thought. You've decided that we've had plenty of time to decide about this. You've decided that we've ignored it. You've decided that we've insinuated things. You've also decided that we're short-sighted and that we're part of a problem.
Prove me wrong.
How does that sound to you?
Sounds like you're getting defensive.
Sounds like you're a bigot.
All right, guys, that's enough. All right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I want to add one thing. I want to clarify if my comment about needing time to digest it, this, is that it is our obligation as city council representatives to review everything that comes before the council. We have had this information for a request to make, in some cases, some very big changes that could possibly have implications on the budget or long-term issues that we just need. I'm just saying, it's not that I'm not aware, but there is a document in front of us that the expectation is if we say, okay, tonight, it will be put on for action next Tuesday or in 2 weeks. What I say, I need more time to get information as far as how much staff time is going to be involved if we do audits, if we do that. It's not the concept. It is the actual items in this recommendation that we need to thoroughly vet when it comes to our responsibility as city council people, not taking into, the whole social thing. But I mean, when we work on the budget, we start that in end of July and August. We approve it in November because it takes time to absorb it. Yeah, we know it's there. We know it's going to be a problem. It still takes us that long to address it. I'm not saying to take 2 or 3 months, but I would like to respectfully ask and move to at some point soon, a work session for the council so that we can ask more questions as it relates to budget ramifications, aligning. I've stated it before. I want us to be very careful if we establish another permanent committee. There's a full list every month that we get of vacancies of our current committees. How are we looking at that? So it's more than just the issue. It's all of the proposals that are submitted to us that we need to analyze from a city government perspective. That's all.
Was
Okay, we've
uncomfortable?
had-
Is it uncomfortable?
What?
It's an uncomfortable thing to talk about.
For me,
Mhm.
no, it is not.
All right, we've been on this subject for about 15 or 20 minutes.
We gonna
Ken,
have-
you haven't,
We gonna have a meeting next time on this.
let me first of all ask, Clint, as we look at the packet, I want us to be focused on what we need to be focused on. Okay, as we look at the information that you shared with us, Clint, relative to the recommendations, you have presented us with an Appendix A that shows future diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. This is on, if you have the electronic packet, this would be on page 97. And it talks about initiative categories, short-term, intermediate, and long-term. This is part of what you have proposed or what is being proposed by the task force for action over the next 5 years, right?
Correct, extending out through 2029.
29, I think that's the next 5 years. All right, so that's Appendix A. You have shown us a diversity statement on page 96 that basically replaces the word task force with DEI committee, and that's the only change in the current inclusion, diversity, and equity statement.
That's correct.
So that's 2 changes. So that would be 2 changes. And then you have proposed a resolution that says Appendix A, which we just reviewed, and
The third component would
and-
then be the creation of the committee.
the creation of the committee. So those are the 3 things. It would be the creation of the committee, the kind of a 5-year look ahead at what might be involved, and then an update to the diversity, inclusion and equity and inclusion statement, pardon me.
You know, I do see-
Just a minute.
Okay.
Let me finish. The other material that you provided from pages 98, I think it is 98, to whatever it was, were things that the DEI committee discussed, maybe ruminated on, maybe whatever, but it has now been digested into this update to the statement, a resolution, and a suggestion that this might be things that we do in the next 5 years. Am I correct?
Correct. The rest of the packet is a report that was provided to me to Tide, as well as then the collection of different initiatives and then results of survey that was fed out to them to prioritize.
Okay, so I just want us to understand, we're focusing on a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement that includes one change, the creation of the proposed creation of a committee, and then a plan that says over the next 5 years, we should look short-term at something, intermediate term in 26, 27, and long-term in 28, 29. So if we were going to have a work session on this and talk about it, I'm assuming that those are the things we would talk about. We would not be redigesting the whole Tide Task Force surveys and all of those things. Is that correct?
That would be advisable. There's certainly room for amendments to it. How far the council wants to take those initiatives and changes on yourselves, it feels like if you start going too far, you're going to turn around and be asking for a committee again to reevaluate certain components, which then would lead back potentially to a task force type of a thing. And do keep in mind, by resolution as drafted, task force was to present in March, and that body kind of dissolving doesn't mean that we can't have those folks get together if needed. But yes, I would think it would be of interest to try to keep it refined down to those three types of initiatives.
The only thing I was going to add is that I would certainly be in favor of recognizing MLK Day and Juneteenth, as many other businesses are doing such. So I don't know why the city wouldn't include that also. Just an idea.
And I'm thinking that there are some of these things that are pretty much
Some valid points to
right,
some of it.
very,
Absolutely.
very valid points. And so that's why I wanted to focus, if we're going to have a work session, I want it to be focused on what the decision is about, not on pages and pages of discussion from but that this has been distilled to this is what the recommendation is.
To the recommendation, correct.
Right. So that would be my first point. Now, it has been requested that we have a work session, which is fine with me. I don't know if we want to have that work session after the next meeting, or there will be a council election if we want to have it the second meeting in April. But that's fine. If people want to look at this 3-page recommendation and ask how much these things will cost, how does this work? What does that mean? We don't think we need to do this or whatever, that's fine. But I think that probably is a preference.
In the parameters of the work session, would some of the things like amendments that we could make be like continuing say, an internal audit or something, but without bringing in
Sure,
outside agencies? Paying them to do
Sure.
something that
right. I think I think that was the request. We need to look at not only what these are, but the timeline for implementation and if there are costs associated with it. Okay, so Clint, we can schedule it for the next meeting and we could invite any prospective council members to that session so that they become aware.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, excuse me, Tom, did that feel like blood coming your way? And so we can schedule them.
Okay.
All right, but what I want us to understand is that this is what we're focusing on. We're focusing on Clint's note. We're focusing on the creation or not creation of a committee in place of a task force. We're focusing on a change in the diversity, equity, and inclusion statement, and we're focusing on Appendix A, which is the proposed 5-year kind of recommendation. Okay,
So are these things coming out for which meeting?
this
I
would,
assume it's gonna be the meeting after the new council person is in.
well, it'll depend on when we can schedule it and what other. I think Tom has been here each time. I think work sessions are open. So it doesn't matter if it's the first meeting in April or the second meeting in April. Because he's here all the time anyway, Ken.
Well, you're gonna have a former, you could be here too.
That's fine. You can
Yeah.
be here.
Next meeting, I'll be here, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Does the work session have to coincide with a regular council meeting?
It doesn't have to, but it's often more difficult to schedule an extra meeting than it is to just schedule a work session after the meeting, or in some cases, we've done it before. But not that often have we done a work session before. Okay, so that's what we will have a work session, either the first meeting or the second meeting of April. We will focus on Clint's report to us, the change in the DEI statement, the resolution, and Appendix A. Clint, you can send that out as that packet only. We will not focus on the next 60 pages of discussion items that came up before the committee. All right.
So you will have out a complete agenda for us to go through.
We will. We will have a complete agenda for you to go through, Ken.
I would like to make, you want any more statements here?
Sure, you can make a statement.
I'll make a very short one. And this is that, excuse me, I watch a lot of TV, read a lot of newspapers, some radio, and so forth. I think the most informative thing that I ever encountered in my life was being in the U.S. Army. I spent, before the Army in college, I spent 17 months in the National Guard. And in that National Guard, I met many people. I went to summer camps. In the U.S. Army, I went into 3 different camps. And I finally was in a place where for 21 months, I was in personnel. And it was the most informative thing being in that particular Army camp that I have witnessed in my life. There are many different, I'll call them different people, mixture of people in that particular camp, and we all got along. And this was back, I'll give you the year, 1956 to 1957. So after I finished college, 3 days later, I went into the U.S. Army and spent 21 months in the U.S. Army. And that was, I got out for early release. So a wonderful experience, meeting so many different people. And I'll just say, I just use the word mixture. I'm very open to differences among people, and I believe that we need to spend time on this. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on. Let's take up resolution 2024-2026 Roundtree Branch Stream Bank Repairs Grant.
Thank you. Every even year, the DNR accepts grant applications for certain environmental projects. We did one in 2018 that was completed. We received another grant that we've had a couple of extensions on. The next grant request period would be due April 15th of this year. And if we are to submit this, we would need to have a resolution for this. One of the reasons why this is kind of uh, uh, in a hurry, if you will, is that in the last week or so, DNR has provided us with a letter saying that it's basically okay to work on the trail that is on the DNR's property. The DNR owns the rail bed that currently has the MPO trail on it. In previous submissions, we were told that we could not be the project sponsor for a project out on that portion of the trail out on the old railroad bed because we did not have an agreement with DNR allowing us to do so. So here in the last week or so, we received word that they would work with us to get such an agreement. We've had community members approach us asking us to submit a grant for stream bank repairs, basically a third iteration now. And so we would, if you all agree to it, we would be proposing to do stream bank repairs in 3 locations. One is just upstream of the Chestnut Street Bridge. And then the other 2 sites, sites 2 and 3, are upstream of what we've called J&N Railroad Bridge by the old J&N Stone area. Those 2 are on the DNR land, and like I said, they recently are allowing us to do that. So I guess the first question is, do we want to submit a grant this year? If we do, then we need to approve a resolution. If we do this, we would be designating, and I'm on the upper side here, up to $100,000 in CIP funds from our funding in 2025 that could impact the 2025 budget. These grants are 50-50 matches, so what we're saying is on the upper side of this, it would be a $200,000 project. We would be committing up to $100,000 for this. So that's what we're looking at. If the council wants to continue with this, we will move forward and bring the resolutions and finish the grant paperwork.
Howard, how are these 3 sites selected?
These sites, site 2 and site 3 were originally in the previous request, but they were removed by DNR because we didn't have that agreement with them. So we had initially identified site 2 and 3 as high priority items. Site number 1 was in the last grant application, but was not selected at that time because we felt that there were other areas that were in more need. So,
Such as 2 and 3.
well, such as 2 and 3, and then the other ones that we are still in the process of working on from this last grant that had been extended. Like up by Cancun Bridge, and a couple areas along Valley Road.
Other people with questions? else with questions or comments. I think we need to give some kind of,
This is coming up.
if the grant were to be submitted, it has to be submitted by April 15th.
Correct.
And we're at May 26th. So that would
March
mean
26th, yeah.
it would come up for action next time to submit the grant. We all know a dollar can only be spent once. So Howard, one of the things I would say to you is if we take 100,000 of your CIP or of CIP funds, where does that leave you?
Personally, I would defer this. But there are members of the community who feel strongly that this needs to be, that we need to go after as much grant funding as we can and to do things to protect the significant investment in the MPO trail. As an engineer, I think that it could probably be deferred for at least another couple of years. But, if we get a few 100-year rain events, the trail could wash out in one or two of these places.
Yeah, Site 2 and 3, I think. yeah,
Site 2 and 3 are
Site 2 and 3 are critical.
pretty critical.
Yeah.
So Howard, one of the problems with riprap, being a fisherman, it's very hard to enjoy the river and fish along it when you're trying not to break your ankles walking on the riprap. So I always see these improvements they're human improvements for the sake of our trail, but they end up being detrimental to the usage of some of these areas and they're for a benefit. They're not necessarily for nature's benefit. Nature intended the river to meander and take its own path. So, I mean, just food for thought. If, examples up off a county queue with that river up there by Fenimore, it's a class 1 trout stream and it's very dangerous to walk along in some areas. So thank you.
But I understand your concern, but I'm not sure in these spots if there are really people fishing and walking along the stream, are there?
Just north of the train bridge they're talking about is a good area to fish for trout. That's the only area I see there. I've not tried some of the other areas. Not to give away a good spot. Now there'll be 30 people there. So it's all gone anyway. Put the riprap in.
To the minutes.
Okay, we need to give some direction.
I'm going to suggest deferment based off of Howard's training and expertise and education in this issue, that we can wait and that perhaps these funds could be better spent somewhere else right now.
So I understand what you're saying. If we took the worst of these sites, which I believe is probably Site 2. I don't know if it's Site 2 or Site 3. Haven't walked there recently. One of those is getting very close.
I mean,
is there any reason it's 3 or none? Especially since we're 2 years behind on one that we've already that we were already supposed to do, and I can't imagine we're going to be able to do it for the amount of money that we
Oh.
received and we allocated 2 years ago.
no. Fortunately, the contractor is going to hold the price. The issue here is kind of an economy of scale. If you end up doing just one, there's a lot of effort for grant writing. There's a lot of effort for engineering and other things that would go into just one location where you could basically reduce the unit costs and unit prices if you spread over additional locations. The DNR, the DNR has its ideas and thoughts. The grant request is up to $150,000 each, for the match and the DNR grant. So we try to do it so that we're maximizing the grant opportunity if we're gonna do this.
Todd suggested that based on Howard's assessment that we perhaps defer. I know we're building a fire station and we don't know all of our costs.
I would agree with Todd. I understand the need, for, some of the stream bank issues, but I'm also very concerned when it comes to the CIP budget and where we're at and the challenge that's coming ahead with that that have been on our list for quite some time.
Anybody else care to speak? And I would say we won't see this back on the agenda next time. Unless there's a compelling reason that staff believes it should be. Okay, next item on the agenda then is contract 1-24, I believe Soden and Grace Street reconstruction.
Okay. Good news. This is for water sanitary, storm and street reconstruction of Soden Street between Water and Grace Street from Madison Street to the cul-de-sac. We had 7 bidders. Low bidder was H. James and Sons. They've done many successful projects in the past. With the bid price of a little over 914,000, we do have a significant we're under budget. So as far as this goes, we're recommending that we award to H. James and Son.
Any questions on that? So the budget, so the amount coming from the CIP would be 448, 502, 20? Is that right? Because the water and sanitary sewer is 466, 115, 56, is that right or not? Or where am I?
Yes, on that column on the spreadsheet labeled PSC adjustment. That's one other thing that wasn't talked about, but we'll be talking with the Water and Sewer Commission. The Public Service Commission has authorized deferring or allocating some project costs that would normally be street related back to water and sanitary sewer. Their thought being was that if we had just a water and sewer project and not a full street reconstruction, that the water and sewer utility would have to at least repave the trench for the water and the sewer and things like that. So the Public Service Commission is saying that up to 20% of the cost of street reconstruction could be allocated back to water and sewer. And that's what I did in the PSC adjustment. And then as you stated, that would mean that the utility would be responsible for 466,000 and the city's CIP portion would be responsible for 448.5.
Okay, any questions on that? Okay, then we'll move on to the overage on Grace and Soden.
Okay. What we have is, since this project came in under budget and covering the amounts for the West Adams Street project, there's just under $518,000 of budget available. I talked in this one about the 20% for reconstructing the street. But, what we're saying is, what do we want to do about that 517, almost $518,000? One, we could approve additional infrastructure projects. And one possibility would be to install concrete on Lewis Street, where the fire trucks would return from a call and they would have to make turns to go back into the fire facility. At an estimated cost of about $50,000. Another possibility would be to reconstruct North Court Street between Lewis and Adams. We're estimating that to be about $402,700. And we could do both of those without additional borrowing beyond what is authorized.
Now, is it not true that we just spent 47,000 of that 517 already tonight?
Actually, there's
Just
there was
asking.
more, the 517 takes into consideration the 47,000.
Okay.
We were 562,000 under budget for Soden and Grace. When you deduct the 47,000 for West Adams, we still have the 517,800. So, like I said, the option one would be to approve additional infrastructure projects. In this case, we're looking at a portion of Lewis Street and doing that block of North Court Street. The other would be to reduce our capital borrowing. Because in the CIP, we're allocating borrowing of $6.2 million between the new fire facility and our CIP.
Do we have any other streets where we have like mostly asphalt and just a section of concrete like you're proposing for Lewis Street? That seems strange. I don't know. That just seems strange to me.
Purpose is to preserve that section with the turning of the heavy.
I understand what it
Be-
is, but the question would be is how do you determine the length of that? I mean,
Well, we would be doing it based on projected turning movements of those vehicles. The vehicles need a certain amount of distance to make turns to go into the driveway, and that's what we would be looking at, is where those vehicles need to start their turns to go back into the driveway for the fire facility. I mean, we have streets where you have concrete and then it goes to asphalt, or asphalt going to concrete. For example, on Chestnut Street, when you're going north towards Lancaster Street, you've got concrete until just a little past Main Street, and then it turns to asphalt. So, I mean, there is that sort of consideration there.
does anybody have,
I would say that installing the concrete on Lewis Street and improving those roads would be a lot more benefit than saving what?
I would too.
And it seems like it's going to contribute to the fire station as well, which is kind of what you were explaining to in your note.
Is there going to be a need to widen Lewis Street at all?
No, we will probably end up having to eliminate parking on part of that street,
North side.
probably.
I think there's no parking already on the south side.
Yeah, we will probably need to remove parking to allow for the vehicles to turn in, but yeah.
Well, it appears that unless I hear otherwise, there's a feeling that we would approve additional infrastructure projects rather than reduce the levy or reduce the capital borrowing. Pardon me.
Thank you.
That doesn't necessarily mean that street. You might have some other things you want to consider.
Good.
Okay, 2023 budget carryovers to 2024, Nicola.
Thank you. This is the time of year where departments, when all the books have been mostly completed, that departments are able to request if there are unspent funds that need to be carried over from one year to the next. This year, we have an unprecedented amount, a lot of CIP projects that are not completed for one reason or another. There is a list in the packet. The first page has the list of CIP projects, which totals $1,148,796. And the second page are requests in the general fund for unspent funds that departments desire to use for certain projects, either that did not complete in 2023 or that they would like to do in 2024 with those unused funds. The total for the general fund is $74,207. In the interest in time, I will not go through each and every project, but you can see in the green column is the carryover amount being requested. Are there any questions?
These would be on for action next time. Would this action be in the consent agenda or would this be a separate action item?
This would, has traditionally been a separate action item, but we
Okay.
could put it in.
No,
the
that's
consent
fine.
agenda.
It should be, I just wanted to clarify where we would see it.
Sure.
Okay, so carryover of 1.148796. And then in some cases, requests, kind of new requests.
Yes, so the CIP projects were all in the budget, but either they have not completed for one reason or another, or perhaps there was a change. There's a little description next to each one that describes the nature of the request to carry over. And then the general fund are all, as you said, new requests to put funding towards something in 2024. That was funds that were left over from 2023 on those line items.
And so that money would be in the general fund reserve.
Yes. So in other words, if all of these requests were denied, those funds would return to the unassigned general fund reserves balance.
Any other questions? Well then, folks, that's the end of the information items, which means that I have only one need for one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Todd. And a second from Bob. Nicola?
Casper,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Cop,
Yes.
Otts,
Yes.
Gates.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I want